Good morning, Pre-K. We're back again with another chapter of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. When we stopped yesterday, if you will remember, or if you didn't have a chance to join us, Alice had met the Cheshire Cat. She'd met several other very strange animals and people, but this cat kept appearing and disappearing. And the last thing to disappear, first it started as his tail, and then it slowly disappeared. There was nothing left but his grin. So, Alice said that she wanted to be invited to play croquet, but she didn't have an invitation. And she didn't know where to go. And the cat told her, well, either way, one way was the Hatter and one way was the hare. So she started out towards the March Hare's house. Oh, and the cat had told her they're both mad. Remember, we talked about here the word mad is not like you're angry. Mad is like you're goofy crazy, okay? So, chapter 7, a mad tea party. So I guess everybody's going to be a little goofy. There was a large table under a tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and the Hatter were having tea. A dormouse was sitting between them fast asleep. The other two were using it as a cushion and resting their elbows on it. It must be very uncomfortable for the dormouse, thought Alice. But being asleep, I suppose it doesn't care. The table was long and was set for company, but the three were all crowded together at one corner of it. There's no room, they cried out when they saw Alice coming. There's plenty of room, said Alice, and she sat down in a large armchair at the end of the table. Have some lemonade, the March Hare said invitingly. Alice looked all around the table. There was nothing on it but tea. I don't see any lemonade, she remarked. There isn't any, said the March Hare. And it wasn't very nice of you to offer it, said Alice. It wasn't very nice of you to sit down without being invited, said the March Hare. I didn't know it was your table, said Alice. There's plenty of room. Your hair needs cutting, said the Hatter, and he'd been looking at Alice for some time with great interest, and this was his first comment. You should learn not to make personal remarks, Alice said. It's very rude. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide, but all he said was, why is the raven like a writing desk? Good, now we will have some fun, thought Alice. I'm glad they've begun asking riddles, she said out loud. I think I can guess that. Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it, said the March Hare. So here is Alice meeting up with the Hare and the Hatter. And the Hare is pointing his finger at her saying, do you think you can find the answer to it? Exactly so, said Alice. Then you should say what you mean, the March Hare went on. I do, said Alice. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know. It's not the same thing, said the Hatter. You might as well say that I see what I eat is the same thing as I eat what I see. Or you might as well say, added the March Hare, that I'd like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like. Or you might as well say, added the Dormouse, who had seemed to be talking in his sleep, that I breathe when I sleep is the same as I sleep when I breathe. It is the same thing with you, said the Hatter, and everyone was silent for a minute. Alice thought over what she could remember about ravens and writing desks, which wasn't much. The Hatter was the first to break the silence. What day of the month is it? He said to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it. And then he shook it and he held it to his ear. There he is with his watch. Alice thought to herself a little and then she said, the 4th. 2 days wrong, sighed the Hatter. Alice looked over his shoulder with interest. What a funny watch, she remarked. It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is. Why should it? Muttered the Hatter. Does your watch tell you what year it is? Of course not, Alice replied, but that's because it stays the same year for such a long time, which is just the same case as mine, said the Hatter. I don't quite understand you, Alice said, as politely as she could. The Dormouse is asleep again, said the Hatter, and he poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The Dormouse shook its head and said, without opening his eyes, of course, just what I was going to say myself. Have you guessed the riddle yet? The Hatter said, turning to Alice again. No, I give up, replied Alice. What's the answer? I haven't the slightest idea, said the Hatter. And there they are, looking at his watch. This book has a lot more illustrations than Charlotte's Web did. And here's a big one. Okay. I don't know how well you can see it because it's black and white, but the Dormouse is sleeping, and they're all looking at him. They think maybe he's talking in his sleep. Nor do I know the answer, said the March Hare. Alice sighed. I think you should do something better with the time, she said, than waste it asking riddles that have no answers. If you knew time as well as I do, said the Hatter, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. Time is a hymn. I don't know what you mean, said Alice. Of course you don't, the Hatter said, tossing his head. I bet you've never even spoken to time. No, I haven't, Alice replied, but I know I have to beat time when I learn music. Ah, that's it, said the Hatter. Time won't stand beating now. If you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you liked with the clock. But alas, the Hatter shook his head mournfully. I had an argument with time last March, just before he went mad, you know, pointing with his teaspoon at the March Hare. It was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at. Do you know the song? I've heard something like it, said Alice. It goes on, you know, the Hatter continued in this way. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle. Here the Dormouse shook itself and began singing in its sleep. Twinkle, 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 twinkle. It went on so long that they had to pinch it to make it stop. Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse, said the Hatter, when the Queen jumped up and yelled out, He's murdering the time, off with his head. Oh, how terrible, exclaimed Alice. And ever since that, the Hatter went on in a mournful tone. He won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now. Is that the reason so many tea things are put out here? She asked. Yes, that's it, said the Hatter with a sigh. It's always tea time. We've no time to wash the things in between. Then you keep moving around the table, I suppose, said Alice. Exactly, said the Hatter, as the things get used, but what happens when you come to the beginning again? Let's change the subject, the March Hare interrupted, yawning. I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tells us a story. I'm afraid I don't know one, said Alice. Then the Dormouse shall, they both cried. Wake up, Dormouse, and they pinched it on both sides at once, and the Dormouse slowly opened his eyes. I wasn't asleep, he said in a hoarse, feeble voice. I heard every word you fellows were saying. Tell us a story, said the March Hare. Yes, please do, pleaded Alice. And be quick about it, added the Hatter, or you'll be asleep again before it's done. Once upon a time, there were 3 little sisters, the Dormouse began in a great hurry, and their names were Elsie, Lacey, and Tilly. And they lived at the bottom of a well. What did they live on, asked Alice. They lived on treacle, said the Dormouse, after thinking a minute or two. Treacle is a kind of syrup, like you put on pancakes. They couldn't have done that, you know, Alice gently remarked. Treacle's just syrup. They'd have all been ill. And so they were, said the Dormouse, very ill. But they did and they lived at the bottom of a well, Alice asked. Have some more tea, said the March Hare to Alice very sincerely. Here's the sleepy little dormouse.
Mm.
And you know what? This is a long chapter, so I think I will stop there and I will save the rest of the tea party, where it's even sillier and crazier, for tomorrow. But isn't that fun? I have no idea what any of them are talking about, but it's kind of silly and fun to hear them, isn't it? Maybe you could have a tea party today at home, or a pretend tea party. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.